About galoshes? Oh, it was Galatians. Oh yeah, galoshes. Sorry. No, but yeah, I wasn't very well read with the Bible. But that was something that you were
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
all up in.
I wasn't sure what I thought about that at first.
Yeah, yeah.
But anyway, so that was pretty much me throughout college. I thought, I was just trying to get done with school so that I could go and just preach the gospel full time
Yeah.
to people. Like at that point, that was like my dream. I'd given up all my other dreams, and I was like, I'm just gonna preach the gospel and see people be saved, and that's gonna be awesome, and that's what I really want to do with my life.
Well, what about your your dreams before? Because you wanted to be a.
Yeah, I wanted to make video games.
Uh-huh.
And I would say that I did have one dream, but it was, I guess, as a Christian, the way I was brought up, like, you can have dreams, but they have to be like, they have to revolve around Jesus. So, like, your dreams have to be used in a way that glorify God. Your dreams need to be used for Him. Like, that's what your talents and your gifts are for. So, there were things that I wanted to do for Him, like make music and sing, and so my music has always been a big part of my life. I do love creating and writing songs and singing and speaking and giving people messages, or like trying to either share the gospel through song or encourage through song, uplift through music, or I used to really like writing really convicting songs.
Oh yeah.
About sin. So that's one dream that I guess I kept, but I think a lot of Christians also pride themselves in giving up what they've given up. For God.
Oh yeah. Well, I used to want to do this, and now I don't.
But so I did go to school for, I guess it was sort of for video games, even though I didn't end up going into it. I went to school for animation, so I got my bachelor's degree in animation, and then I finished and went to go live with my parents again in Texas. And there was a church there that had been recommended to me by a guy called Paul Washer, which was a preacher that I really liked to listen to.
Oh, I didn't even know that was him who.
Yes, he had recommended this specific church, which I ended up finding out was, well, I would call it a cult.
Yeah.
A Christian cult. But I was a huge Paul Washer fan, and I went to this conference called the True Church Conference, and because I was looking for a church, I'd been searching for a church and praying for a church for years, and ended up getting pointed out. Well, I ended up getting pointed to a church, which actually was in the same city that my parents had just moved to, and I was going to go live there, and I was like, oh, this is of God, that I've, found this church, and I'm going to go live there, and I'm going to go there, and I'm going to get involved here, and finally, an answer to my prayers. Not what I was expecting.
Do you think he knows what it was like?
I don't know. I know he actually came to the church and preached there when I was there. How well he knew the pastor, I don't know.
Yeah.
But he recommended it.
Yeah, so I would assume pretty well. Now, so I'm a Catholic. I don't know who Paul Washer is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's like,
Yeah.
who?
Yeah.
I would So why don't you give me a little bit of a explanation of kind of who
Who
he
he
is?
is? Well, I found out about him through a man at one of the churches that I went to. He was a Gideon. Do you know what a Gideon
No.
is? So the Gideons are typically old men who hand out Bibles, and they typically leave Bibles in hotel rooms.
Okay.
So like a lot of those book Bibles that are in there from the Gideons, they're just about like distributing the word of God so that people
Mm-hmm.
can read it.
They're salesmen.
Well, they don't sell it.
No. I know they're selling Christianity to people.
They're trying to get people to read the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty much. I don't know why it's only men and typically old men. I don't really know. But
So I guess that answers like a question, because I had a, when I was in where I grew up near I'm in South Texas. That's where I grew up. And George Strait, his dad, I guess he's a Gideon, because he came to our school and gave out Bibles to everybody.
mm-hmm.
And he came and talked with all of us. And yeah, so I guess that's what he was. I didn't know that, but
yeah, probably.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So they go like on a public circuit and they go and talk to, like, have huge.
Well, they have conferences.
Mhm.
So he had a conference, and I guess Paul Washer came to speak
Mhm.
to the Gideons at this conference, and he took home a CD and gave it to me. This man from my church who was also
Okay.
taking me through an evangelism class called Evangelism Explosion.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a it's a way to learn how to like go house to house and
Mm-hmm.
present the gospel in a way to people. So
In a fun, exciting way.
yeah, I remember he is the one that was really passionate. And one time in the middle of service, he was invited up by the pastor, but
Mhm.
he came up and he was talking about this evangelism explosion program, and he was talking about like how we need to talk to all of our neighbors, because if we don't talk to our neighbors, their blood is on our hands. And he was so passionate about it, like
Mm-hmm.
and I just thought it was so cool. I was like, oh, that's so awesome. I remember the pastor being so mad at him that he went up there and said that. I was like, why are you mad at him? Like, that was so awesome.
Oh.
Yeah. I was like, man, that's the way I feel. Like,
Uh-huh.
I need to be in that class. And, yeah, so that's how I got a CD
Mm-hmm.
of Paul Washer's preaching. And honestly, I'd never really heard anybody preach like him before. Like, it was very passionate.
Yeah.
It was very, like, it felt very, very sincere,
Mm-hmm.
but kind of like, it felt like somebody who really cared about people's souls and was, crying out to them, but I experienced very negative things after listening to him as well. Like, the more and more that I listened to him,
Mm-hmm.
the more and more I started to doubt my salvation, because a lot of it was very severe
Mm-hmm.
and very, like, a lot of fear and a lot of,
It was
like,
a lot of, you might think that you're safe because you're a Christian, but you're not. It's coming, and you better run.
Well, no, it was more like talking about how, like, there's so many in his thing was like big against American Christianity. Like, American Christianity is like, oh, you go to church and you pray the prayer and you're welcomed into the family of God, and that, like, there's all these people who think that because they just prayed a prayer on one Sunday that they're good and that they're going to heaven. And so he's, like, against that whole idea of, like, this Americanized form of, like, I don't know, I guess you'd kind of call it maybe easy believism, that, well, because I prayed this prayer, I'm good, I'm going to heaven.
Mm.
So I understand that, and that makes sense to tell people, well, no, that's not really how it works.
Yeah.
But for some people, maybe it is, but not everybody that just recites something at church is
just doing it.
Yeah, is gonna be good with God just because they said some words.
I would say a majority of people probably think it's about the way that you are, the way that outside of church. Probably more so outside of church. But
and that's another thing that he would speak against. Like there's all these people who call themselves Christians, but they just go to church on Sunday and then they live like heathens all the rest of the week or whatever. So,
which I do agree. I think there are a lot that do that. Yeah.
So, I understand that, but then if I know a lot of other Christians too that when they listen to that stuff over and over and over, then they start to think that he's talking about them. And they start to wonder, well, how do I know if I'm saved? And it's just like you hear so much judgment and fear, and you start to I don't know, you start to worry.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of encouragement or love or, it's all about trying to tear down these things that people are believing in. That, he's saying doesn't save. Yeah. I don't know. It's just, it might be good for somebody to hear one time in their life. Yeah. But I don't think it's something good for people to, consume on a daily basis.
It's like drug use, Maybe good for one time. Just don't get stuck in it. I'm just playing.
So, I was in that church, and I could see from the beginning when I was there that some things were off, and I recognized it. But after being in there for a few years, things started to really affect me. Just getting caught up in it. And I remember having a lot of nightmares that I was sitting in church and then somebody pointed at me and they're like, she's not saved. And then, everybody else was looking at me, and then they kicked me out of the church, and I was in the street, and I don't know. There was also this idea too that they were the church that had the light, and all these other people, they were in false churches, and
Oh, that sounds so great.
Almost well, we're the only
true church. Oh.
And most other churches were not, and there was only a very small circle of other Reformed churches that they would associate with, and so I definitely got caught up there thinking that there weren't very many other churches that were good, and that I should marry somebody, from
your church,
my church, or that circle of churches.
Yeah.
And I even remember my dad saying, you need to widen your pool of of men, because you don't have a lot to pick from here. But I did end up meeting my first husband there, and it was not, well, that whole situation just was not pretty. Because he and I ended up getting together, and then our families were both against it, and that caused all this drama in the church, to the point of you guys either leave the church or break up. And
That's
we were
so crazy that the church has authority over your relationship.
Yeah, it was crazy. They thought that you had to obey your parents. The Bible says you should obey your parents.
They not obey, but do what your parents tell you, and not what. it's not just about, even if it's wrong, you have to do what your parents tell you.
Well, no, there is one qualifier. They can't ask you to sin.
Mm-hmm.
But if they don't ask you to sin, then you need to do what they tell you. Just like in a husband-wife relationship, they say the wife has to submit and do what her husband says unless he's asking her to sin.
Technically, jumping off of a bridge is not sinning.
Well, it kind of is, but you're not supposed to harm yourself.
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm saying, like, they're telling you, like, jump off of this bridge. It'll be fun. You gotta do it. It's technically not a sin. You're not gonna die.
Well, is there water down there?
I don't know. I'm sure.
But anyway, like, there was a lot of rules like that. I don't know how they were getting that from the Bible. Yes, children obey your parents, but we're not children.
Yeah.
I
mean, how old are you?
26, 27.
Yeah.
Around that time, yeah, like, well, there was a lot of books, too, that people tried to use, like, I think Kiss Dating Goodbye, which now the author has come out and said that his book was extremely damaging to people and has apologized. But they tried to use that book to say, well, you need these certain signs from God for your marriage to be blessed. Like, you need your parents' like approval, and the church should approve of it, and like,
that's just so strange to me. Like, you have to have the church's approval. Like, they should have nothing to do with your relationships with people. Like, marriage, I understand, it's a sacrament, but I would say that that's like, maybe, hey, we just want to make sure that you guys are good to one another.
Oh,
that should be the only thing.
No, that wasn't even like a priority.
Wow.
No, it's more.
So, I kind of want to ask. It's
Okay.
just because, your husband is curious. So what was it that your parents did not like about him, and what was it that his parents didn't like about you? If that's something you're willing to talk about.
So, I would say my ex was very combative. Especially with my dad.
Yeah.
And I would admit that my dad was questioning him in a way that was a little bit aggressive. And so that was an easy thing for him to use as an excuse. Yeah. But for me, I think, at least from what I was told, and I don't know for sure if this is even true, but I was told that they didn't like me because I was a quote-unquote weak Christian, because there was a point that when I questioned whether or not I was a Christian.
Yeah.
So me questioning whether or not I was a Christian made me weaken my faith.
Because you wanted to sit there and break it down and figure out, okay, I believe that I am a Christian. I just, I want to confirm with what I believe.
Yeah.
And by doing that...
Well, yeah, because there was a time when I was having doubts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
so that was like,
does.
I know, everybody does, but that's like something that you didn't say.
Yeah, you're supposed to be quiet. You don't talk about that. If you talk about it,
if
then
you
it's
talk about that,
happened.
you're going to be judged. I mean, everybody judged everybody in that church about everything. And they were like, I like to call them the fruit police. Looking at everybody's fruit in their life, looking for good fruit, looking for bad fruit, and saying, well, you got bad fruit and you're not a Christian. A lot of that came from Paul Washer, because he was like, a Christian is going to have good fruit. And if you have bad fruit, because it's symbolic of you're a tree, and a good tree produces good fruit, and a bad tree produces bad fruit. So if you're producing bad fruit in your life, you're a bad tree. And if you're a bad tree, you're not a Christian. Because Christians are good trees that produce good fruit in their life.
I am like, I had never experienced so many like symbols and allegories and all this stuff.
This is all Christianese
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah. I'd never known what Christianese was. I was like, what are you talking about? And then she goes explaining, I'm like, oh, okay, I get you. But I've learned so much about all that from you.
Mm.
Fruit police.
Yes, that's what I like to call them. They see bad fruit. They're going to judge you. They're going to, raise their brow and be like,
Yeah, and
I wonder if they're really saved.
They'd go and test you, too. They'd test out the new people.
It's so funny because they pride themselves on being like, well, it's all about what Jesus did. It's all just by believing and in faith, and we don't have to do anything, in of ourselves to be saved. Like, it's Jesus and what he did on the cross, and your belief and trust in him that makes you Christian, and it's nothing to do with ourselves, and they make it sound so nice and so it's a free gift, right, from Jesus. But then for the rest of your life, if you're in a church like that, it's like, well, I don't know if you are a Christian because you have this thing in your life. And it's like, well, what do you even believe about what Jesus did? If it's Jesus gave me this gift, salvation, but now what, I don't have it because you see this thing in my life that you think and so what do I have to get rid of this thing in my life to be a Christian? What, I have to become a Christian to get rid of this thing in my life because I'm really not a Christian? And so it's like, it messes with your brain where you get confused about, well, what?
Yeah.
So that was not fun. But, so.
We're talking about
my ex. So we end up, well, not you and me, but him and I end up leaving the church and getting married. And basically cutting ourselves off from both of our families and the church. So basically I didn't have anybody in my life and I was isolated. And that worked out really nicely for him.
Yeah.
Because he turned out to be a narcissist and he turned out to be abusive. So, I don't know how much you want me to share about that.
We can get into that later.
Just say that it was a bad 9 years of my life, and it took me 9 years. Well, within the first 6 months of being married, I wanted a divorce, but I thought that you weren't allowed to get a divorce because God hates divorce, and it would be a sin for me to get a divorce. So that's what I thought. So I stayed for another, 8.5 years.
Yeah.
Or so. So it took a long time for me to see that I was in an abusive relationship. And then once, and I don't go into all the details on how I learned that and everything, but I recognized it through another lady that I was going to church with because she was in a similar situation. And it was like not picture perfect, but identical. Yeah. And I was like, oh, well, this is my situation too. And so, talking to her really helped me, in recognizing the situation I was in. I started reading books and I was like, I have to get out of here. I'd been in a position where I was in a very submissive role, and I didn't have really any rights in that marriage. It was actually wrong for me to say that I had rights. I wasn't allowed to say that I had rights because according to him and other people at the church, you're a sinner, and you deserve, really all you deserve is to go to hell, and everything that Jesus has done for you is a gift. You don't deserve anything. If anything, you deserve hell. So that was the kind of the idea of like, how dare you say that you have any rights, because you don't have any rights. And I was just supposed to submit and obey, and that was what I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
That was my role as a wife. And I was a quote unquote bad wife, because I
fought him the entire
fought
way.
him, and I started to set boundaries, and that didn't go well, and that made things escalate really fast. And so I just left. Literally, I had been thinking about it and planning it for a couple of months, and then he'd made some threats, and so the next day, literally, like, I had my family help me get out and move a bunch of stuff, and I went and go and stayed with my parents. And so I was in a really confusing position, because I was like, I feel like God is telling me to get out, and God is telling me completely opposite things from what I was learning at church and what my ex was telling me. So I'd spent about 3 months doing nothing but reading and praying and trying to figure out what I believed and what God wanted me to do, and trying to understand like the Bible, because I had learned the Bible says this, but God was telling me this, so I had to fit the pieces together. Yeah. So that it would make sense, because I was like, the Bible can't be telling me one thing and God telling me the other. Something in my understanding has to be wrong. Mm-hmm. So I spent a lot of time just breaking down my beliefs and the Bible and trying to reconcile those two until it all made sense. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of where I was at. After I went through that process, I filed for divorce, and he made it very difficult, and was like holding it up and like just making it so much more drawn out than it needed to be. So it was after a few months of dealing with that I was like, you know what? I feel like I'm ready to move on with my life. Like, this divorce, it's going to happen. I don't know how long it's going to take, but I want to start dating again, or at least start making friendships and getting to know people. I was like, I don't really want to jump into a relationship right away, but I want to put myself out there, and I want to get to know, some guys as friends. And so that's when the whole online dating thing started for me. That's where I was at.
I had actually done online dating a few times prior to when we met. I had done, I think I'd done like Zeusk, I think is what it was called. It was like
I haven't heard that one.
There's that one. There's like OK Cupid.
I haven't heard that one.
You haven't?
I've heard of that one.
Okay, yeah. And then I did Match as well. I had tried a few of them. I didn't really like it, and it was like the thing about those dating sites is you have to pay if you want to respond to anybody. And it's so stupid. Like, why do you even offer a free thing? Is it just to tease you with like, oh, look at all these people who are, one, as a guy, look at all these women who are never going to respond to you ever. If you want a response, you're going to have to pay for it, buddy. And so the last time for online dating when I met you. I was on Match, and that was the only one. The only one I was on.
I was on like 5.
Yeah. I was on Match, and I got on there. I even like, I knew going into it, I was like, I gotta pay for a subscription or else I'm not gonna be able to talk with anyone, because I know. And at that point, I was living with no. I had been living with my parents, and then I had just bought my house, and I think it had been like 4 years that I had lived here. And so I was like, no, I don't have any friends. I don't have anybody. I'm just going to do this online dating thing, and I'm going to do it right. And hopefully things will work out. And I remember the first, like, month of it, it was nothing. Not a single response. And I even got to the point where I was so like, hey, I messaged somebody, hey, it's okay. You don't have to, like, talk to me at all. I'm literally messaging you to make sure that messages are getting through to people, because I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if it even shows, like, it's been read. And I was like, man, that was so demoralizing. That was so demoralizing for me. I was like, ugh, this is never going to work out. And then it's like Match hits this switch where they're like, oh, okay, now you can talk with people. Because then I started getting messages. And I was like, what's going on? And so I went on a few dates before I met you. I'd gone on 1, 2, 3, I think 3 different people that I met. And they were nice, but there just wasn't really anything there. And so I remember pretty distinctly, I was at work and I was scrolling through, and then I saw this picture of this woman who's blonde, holding a puppy, I think.
Yeah.
And I don't know where you were, but you had a jacket on. I remember that picture. I was like, man, she's gorgeous. I was like, there's no way. And like, you had a lot on your profile too, I think. It was a lot about, like, you had your own business is what you said. And then you talked about your beliefs and stuff. That was a big one. But you also talked about video games and how much you love video games and all these really, really awesome things. I was like, wow, she's like perfect, but here we go. She's not going to respond to me ever. So I don't even know why I did, because there were other ones that I saw that I was like, they're not going to respond to me. I'm just not going to. But I did to you. It was like I told myself, what's the worst that's going to happen? She ignores you. That's it. And, you're right where you were. So who cares? And so I was like, okay, I'll send a message.